Tonight, heading home, the remains of 4 Wadawurrung people to return to their traditional lands. Ride of a lifetime, we'll look back to the '73 Melbourne Cup and remember the jockey that changed the race. And virtual culture, the next generation uses new technology to take an old story into the future. Good evening and welcome to NITV News. Wearing their traditional colours, the Wadawurrung people of Victoria performed their own ceremony to reclaim the remains of 4 of their ancestors. The Wadawurrung say the occasion was one of both sorrow and celebration.
It began with a breath, a gust of life to start the cleansing ceremony for the remains of 79 Wadawurrung people, one of them a 14-year-old girl.
The smoking ceremony is held whenever there's a burial, whenever there's a special event, to ensure that the event you're doing, and in this case the handover of the remains, is done in a respectful way. And we're not taking bad spirits, bad karma or bad thoughts with us and with the old people.
Some of the remains have been stored at the museum for more than 100 years, so the day was one of celebration and sorrow.
Yeah, sorry that it's taken so long. Sorry that our ancestors have been sitting in cardboard boxes in museum shelves, and now they're coming home.
The repatriation has taken 15 years of research and negotiation, but the Museum of Victoria says having the remains formally identified and returned under traditional custom is worth the effort.
We have understood for a long time that the practices of the past were very hurtful, that removing people from their graves was the wrong thing to do, and that we needed to find a way of righting that wrong.
4 of the remains from the smoking ceremony have now been returned to their traditional Wadawurrung lands. But more than 800 of our ancestors remain at the university waiting to be identified for their journey home. Catherine Little, NITV News.
The repatriation of remains from Victorian institutions has been underway for about 25 years now, but to those who work in the area of repatriations, it is still needing far greater attention on the international level. Matt Pohl is responsible for Australia's oldest place of Western learning, the University of Sydney and its museums, and I talked to him about remains still in overseas institutions.
There are so many unprovenanced remains and so many international institutions around the world that are holding Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander remains that need a centralised place to send these remains back through to not only store them but also to facilitate liaisons with the Aboriginal communities all around Australia and all their diverse needs.
So how many countries are we talking about that we still need to receive remains from?
Well, most major institutions in the world have some forms of Aboriginal remains, if not material culture. It was incredibly popular in the late 19th and early 20th century for scientists of all persuasion to be collecting and acquiring Aboriginal remains as part of their museum collections, and the calls for repatriation since the 1970s have only really identified what they think is several thousand.
Here at Sydney University, you've been involved in the return of remains. What are the protocols that you follow to ensure that they are returned in a sensitive way?
We start out with discussions with community members. Usually communities are a bit shocked at first to find out that ancestral remains from their traditional language regions are being held in museums. So we give them information as much as we know about where they were found, what we can know about them through simple analysis and looking at them. And then we start a process of discussing with the elders how they would like to see these remains returned. It's not always easy. quite often they're not able to be returned to the exact location that they were found. So there's a lot of negotiations that need to go on with elders and organisations like National Parks and Wildlife and different organisations like that to actually find a place where they can be reburied and be brought back to country.
Now, you've been involved with close to 280 remains being returned here at Sydney University. What does it mean for universities around the country? Do they have a protocol similar to what's happening at Sydney University?
Those with good medical schools have often held Aboriginal remains in their anatomy sections. A lot of modern ethical research would not need to do that anymore. So in a sense, the idea of returning them is to make up for those ethical mistakes of the past and to actually make sure that these remains are given the respect that they deserve.
A new organisation is being launched to aid young parents and vulnerable families in the centre of Perth's Noongar community. And Ngala Indigenous Parenting Service, based in Midland, is about to launch a new range of services, including home visits for those struggling to cope with the strains of parenting.
Nestled in the main streets of the CBD of Midland in Perth, the Ngala Parenting Service has been finding their feet in the community for the last 3 years.
Well, the home visiting program is a new thing for Ngala, and middle of last year we wanted to change the direction of the Indigenous Parenting Service itself, and we knew that the community was asking for more services coming to them.
Karen Lewis is the Indigenous Coordinator for Ngala and has seen the social changes in the area amount to requiring a service like the Ngala Parenting Service.
We knew we wanted Noongar people, strong Noongar women to be on board here, and so it took us a while to find the right people for this program, and we have them on board now.
Midland is part of the city of Swan, and the suburbs covered in this area amounts to the largest Indigenous population in Perth. The Ngala team of Aboriginal peer support workers like Michelle Holmes are an integral part of linking up with the local community, including home visits.
Being here in Midland and I grew up in this community, so most of the people, most of the Noongar families, know us. So yeah, so it's good to be able to walk alongside them, whether it's just sitting down having a yarn and a cuppa and just encouraging words really.
Michelle is one of 4 peer support workers at Ngala who help support parents through fundamental parenting practices like feeding and putting your child to sleep, aspects that many may take for granted.
We just encourage them, with parenting skills. We link them up with other services within the community if they need to. And yeah, so just like we're all Noongar mums ourselves and we got children, and so some of the things they, been through, we've been there and we've come out the other end,
It's not only mothers who Ngala aim to lend support to. Grandparents and single fathers are also welcome to the centre.
We are dealing with whole different scenarios, whole different ballgame of issues for the young ones, such as no support, no family support for the young ones, or the fact that they are 16 years of age, 8 months pregnant, and have no accommodation and that. So there's different issues for the different generations, but mainly it's about having people there from their own community supporting them.
The official launch of the Ngala Parenting Service will be on the 12th of November. Craig Quartermain, NITV News, Perth.
A group of young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people from across Australia has come together to develop a new national community awareness campaign for Headspace. Headspace has a national network of 55 centres across metropolitan, regional and rural areas, as well as an online and telephone counselling service, Headspace. The new campaign aims to improve mental health literacy among our young and increase the number coming to Headspace for problems affecting their mental health and well-being.
I feel like mental health is kind of the foundation of everything we do and our well-being, and in our culture, our spirit. And I feel like that there's such a big element around shame and deficit, and I want to be a part of, the group in order to eliminate that shame and bring forth positive psychology and positive energy, and that begins with service participation.
Always bring it back to that sense of culture, which I think is really important if you're doing it to aim to get Aboriginal people through the door to contact Headspace.
We're able to create a word of mouth about what's going on with Headspace, what they're hoping to achieve, so we can connect to our community.
To get rid of those negative connotations so that they can get health and live really normal lives despite the fact that they may have that illness.
There's a different understanding of other people now, and I think that was the best thing, is actually meeting other Aboriginal and Torres Strait people, because you could think what's right for you is right for your community, but you've also got to realise there are a lot of other people out there as well, and we have to get something to target all of us. But I think it's a good experience and something great will come out of it.
Any parent knows that new technologies are the domain of Generation Y, who've grown up with it all around them. But how significant they can be to Indigenous peoples is being explored by young scientists keen on taking action with the help of old and new technology. NITV's Nancy Guevara reports.
Michaela Griffiths is an environmental scientist and Ruth Mirams is a chemist. They're friends and partners in a company called Paramodic. Their vision is to change the world and make it a better place for humanity. But when they attended the World Indigenous Network conference in Darwin, the experience actually changed them.
So the paddles we're holding today are 2 of a collection of 55 that have gone all around the world connecting First Nations together. These were painted at the World Indigenous Network conference as part of a project that we did in a team of 7 people from 4 countries.
The Magic Canoe project is based on a Canadian Aboriginal, Eric Young's story that paddles are a necessity to enable seagoers to move into the future.
The 2 we're holding today, the one I'm holding was painted by an artist from Ramingining in Australia. The one Mick's holding was painted by a Wiradjuri lady, also from Australia.
Mick and Ruth are shamelessly idealistic and call themselves service scientists, dishing up formulas to improve society. Now, Magic Canoe combines culture and technology to keep oral histories, art and storytelling alive through a smartphone app.
We're interested in connecting young people and elders in telling their stories through digital media, because digital media is the way that young people communicate, and we're trying to encourage young people to get involved in narrative and storytelling and story sharing and evolving our culture.
To hear the story of the artists who've painted the paddle, the smartphone reads the artwork and each artist tells their story.
My name's Deegri Indaminkali. The painting I did on the oar, firstly, is my signature piece. But secondly, it was largely influenced by the story of the Magic Canoe.
The 55 paddles have been to every continent in the world to build a narrative map of the World Indigenous Network. Nancy Guevara, NITV News.
Still ahead on NITV News, the Indigenous marathon runners take New York by storm.